I'm going to introduce most of you to value pricing. This has been around since 2003. And the basis of value pricing is that what we are paying for is an outcome or a delivery. We are not paying something based on the amount of effort or time that it takes to produce the outcome. And and with that change in philosophy, there's other things that that change along the way. Is this changing? There we go. The reason I got into value pricing is that I work in a niche market. I'm a controller, and the problem with being a controller is that nobody knows what it is. It's not a common word outside of the financial industry, and the best definition that I can give you is an operational definition, in that a controller supervises a bookkeeper and reports to a CFO. It is a middle position, and that's one definition of it. But the other problem is that the controller is very fuzzy. In other words, there's no specific credentials that you need for it. There's no specific barriers to entrance, like school.
Yeah, they're going to trade. So they want to get you into the rapid exit program to help pay.
Did I do something? I'm hearing voices. Anyway, so it's really fuzzy, and basically what happens as a controller is that the duties I work out with the owner of the company, because there is a lot of flexibility, which is another reason it's hard to explain. Value pricing, the most common things that people say about value pricing, the strangest thing is that the customer knows the cost of the work before the work begins. The reason that this is true is that the customer is the only one who knows what the value is to the business. The value is different to different businesses, and the customer has that in mind. The customer makes that definition. And in order to do that, they need to participate in setting the price. The other issue that's different is that there's no such thing as a fixed price for companies of a certain size or whatever. Each customer has a different price for a similar outcome. And the difference could be based on the volume of work or some upsells or whatever. But in general, there is a pricing strategy instead of a solid price that people quote. In value pricing, we have a transaction between a buyer and a seller, and each one has their own interest in mind. They don't want the same things. And the reason for the negotiation and setting things up is that each one has their own interests. They might not tell the other party, and they put together an agreement that will give either one of them what they want. So it's basically a win-win situation. The pressure that's associated with the win-win, by the way, is that the customer knows in advance, and it's very hard. It's a risk on the customer side. There's also a risk on the vendor side as well, and we'll get to that. What most people do now is something called cost plus pricing, and what that happens is that somebody sits up in the back room with a spreadsheet and comes up with a price that covers the labor and material cost to produce an outcome, and then they mark it up by a percentage. And that way, this is part of the issue without having a process for it. Basically, they are covering time and materials. The issue with this is that it makes no difference to the customer whether or not the vendor lives in a high rent building versus a low rent building. It doesn't matter if all these things that are a big part of the cost to sell are not really issues that the customer cares about at all. The customer just wants an outcome. And so some of these things like the the salary that the workers have on the vendor side is not an issue for the customer. They really don't care. The other, when you scale in cost plus pricing, basically you add more hours or more workers. Those are the two situations. With value pricing, the scaling is based on, the pricing is based on the volume of business. One of the issues that happens here is that with the new advances in technology, we can become much more effective or efficient in the work that we do. So what happens is somebody can have 100 bank transactions that they put in by using keystrokes, and that takes a certain amount of time. And then there's a bank feed that comes along that will do the same thing in 10 or 15 minutes that would normally take an hour or two using the keystrokes. The customer doesn't care how that data got there. They just want the results. So that one of the major factors here is in the cost plus model, when the vendor gets more effective, they earn less money and they have to go out and find more business. So that can be an issue. Another common thing that happens with cost plus pricing is it's so easy to add another billable hour on something, and scope creep can be a big deal. What happens with the vendor is that if the vendor has other work for someone on their team and the scope creep is with the current assignment they're on, they've got to do some juggling. So this gives with the fixed pricing and the fixed list of services, this gives more certainty to the vendor, as well as the customer. How do people price? I call this a wind reading exercise, but one of the things people do is they ask their customer how much they're going to charge. And the customer doesn't really know. First of all, the customer is getting a service from an industry that isn't their industry. They may not understand what the pricing is. So when I come in as a bookkeeper or controller, they have no idea, somebody who's in the trades has no idea what the pricing structure is in my field. So they don't really know how to quote the price for something that they know not much about. Market price is really yesterday's price, and the market price is basically an average of what people sell, the price that they agree on. If a person has a specialty, if a business has a specialty or something that's a very important feature that other people don't have, they're still part of the market price. So a company that has any sort of specialty, any sort of special training background and systems, that is not part of the market price. So the market price is sometimes used as a guide, but it doesn't really answer the question. Another way to price is to price below your competitors. The good news is you get the business. The bad news is you have to work harder. So as you price down, and the rate and the race to the bottom of the barrel in terms of pricing is a problem because the vendor doesn't have the time to develop to their customers to produce as a good a quality outcome as they would ordinarily if they were being paid a price that's reasonable for their service. There's other things that happen along the way that help reduce prices. There's vouchers, there's rebates, there's this deal, there's that deal. This is a kind of like a one-time situation, and on a professional services engagement, which is something that goes on for a while, that only works for one month or 1 week or whatever. and it is not really, and the value of the work is the same each time, so things move around. It's just another way to get the price down. So let me go to the next slide. The only way, this is one of the things that I've learned by testing. The only way to get a good price is to test the market yourself with your own offering. If you have a single price for your product, then it's nearly always the wrong price. It's probably too low for you to make to produce a good service, or it could be too high and the customer doesn't want it. So if you're looking for a price that's a fair price for your work, the odds that a single price is the correct answer is nearly always wrong, because there's lots of prices out there. So the only way to do it is to test. And in the fixed pricing world, we test constantly. We test bundles, we test individual services and that sort of thing. That is the only way to do it. The price does change from time to time. As the world changes, as the offering and capabilities of different companies change. And one of the things that I realized along the way is that if your lead, it's to watch your lead to closure ratio to find out if your test is producing any decent results. Because if your lead to closure ratio is very high, then you're not pricing enough. You can probably get more for your work. If you have a lead to closure ratio that's like 75% or 80%, excuse me, that tells me that your price is too low. If you close everything, then your price, let me start this again. If you close too often, then your price is too low. If you don't close enough, then it's too high. And that's part of the testing that goes on. You'd like to find something that is a good for both of you, but many customers are willing to pay more than the price that they've agreed to. And one of the issues is that this is the process of finding what that price is that is reasonable for the service delivery. Let me go buttons over here. This is the way that customers want certainty. They want to know what it costs. I ran across this in preparing for this presentation, and I like it. I like this very much, that a business exists to create value and generate wealth outside of itself. I tell my customers that I want to increase their wealth, and that is my mission. I want them to have a better life, a better time, whatever. I want to increase if their goal is to have more time, I want that to happen. But I am looking at increasing their wealth as best I can. Fixed price, the bad news is that fixed price is tough because you have to have very good, stable internal systems to support your service delivery. And it has to be consistent. You need good relationships with your vendors. If they come in and change a price, then you need to negotiate that with them. The team needs training. And one of the other things about value pricing is if the project fails, no money changes hands because there's no value. And this is really an ethical situation, an ethical outlook for me. Everybody's entitled to their own way of thinking about this, but basically it's very important to me that I produce an outcome that is useful to my customers. It's an ethical issue for me, so I don't charge if the project fails. Let's talk about the way that we construct the price for the customer. And the common way right now is something called menu pricing, and it's called the magic of 3. And people like to have a choice. They want to have a choice, and this is the way that we give them a choice. So let's go to Apple, where everyone uses this as a good example. The Apple Shuffle, was the first thing that came out. And I thought the shuffle had to do with somebody taking a walk. But what it really means is that the next tune that you hear is set at random. You have no control over what you're going to hear next. You can't hear your favorite song a second time in a row because there's no capability for that. So that is the lowest cost. It gives you value. It gives you the tunes you want, but you don't have any, you can't say which ones you want, or if you're not in the mood for hearing some song that you want to hear and when you want to hear it. The mini, which is the next value up, it lets you choose, and you can choose whatever you want. You can skip, you can go, you have a screen that lets you choose. And the classic has the premium version that holds an entire library of music, and that is the high price. So this is kind of like a working model that we use in order to give somebody an option. And each one of these has an avatar. The shuffle is somebody who wants a low price and just wants to hear music. And it's the avatar. When I first heard that, I thought somebody was playing a game, but it's a notion. It's a description of the potential customer that is suitable for this level of service. So there would be 3 avatars for this in the mind of the person who's putting this together for Apple. This is a partial shot of my controllers. It's called a one sheet. And what happens with this is that it might not be, I want you to see the structure and not so much the detail. The 3 avatars are at the top. They're called diamond, gold, and silver. And for each one of them, there's a customer in mind. For example, the diamond is somebody who wants the very best for their business. They want the highest quality of information. They want the best kind of service, et cetera, and they're willing to pay for it. The middle price is what a person would normally want in order to keep their business running. And the silver is the option for somebody who is on a budget and wants something that is simple and basic and does the job. In this system, with the lowest price needs to meet any statutory requirements of the service. So for example, if I sell payroll, there are statutory requirements for computing payroll, and those have to be, basically that is what is in the lowest price model. In other words, the lowest price offering, because that is the stuff that you absolutely have to do. Anything else is extra, but the lowest cost, the lowest level of service is the one that meets the statutory needs. The next one in typically is the one that most people choose. And when they're and this is another way that you do the testing on the price. If everyone goes to the high-end price, that means that it's too low for you. And then I would raise the price then to get it to a point where most people choose the middle offering. Because if most people are choosing the highest level, I'm leaving money on the table. Because in general, many of those people would be able to pay more. So, okay. The issue that's associated, the thing that takes some time with this is that value pricing is a business system, and there are moving parts. So when you come up with a strategy, what happens when you set your prices is that the price isn't a number, it is a strategy. And that means that you have no more guessing. You can give the customer a price during a meeting with a prospect. You can give the prospect the price. This software is on my iPad. and I can go through the options with them and give them a price during a session, during a discussion with a prospect. This is a surprise for a lot of people. This is a good thing. It's easier for the prospect to understand what's happening. The services on the list, it's very important that they're extremely well defined. That is the issue of scope creep, because you are working, in this case, the vendor is working on a fixed price, and it's not reasonable for them to have, they need to know what they have to do for that price. If other work comes up, there's another price negotiation that would include any change in the scope of work. The price, one of the issues that bothered me when this first started is I said, how do you scale? How do you, how do you talk? Because at the time, I had one customer that had 10 invoices a month and another one that had 250 invoices a month. I said, you can't use the same numbers, the same calculations for the two of them because they're very, very different. So what we do in the price calculation is we include some measure of the volume of work. And that is a part of the basic calculation. And then you go to the level of service on top of that. When the customer sees the price, the customer sees 3 prices. They see the high, medium, and low, and then they choose that and they make their choice based on that, on the level of service. But the level that they want and the volume that they want is in the price that they get, sitting at the table, talking about whether or not they want to do business together. Once the customer sees the price, there's an opportunity for upselling and cross-selling. So for example, I could add payroll on that, or I could add a cash flow tool on top of that. Those are additions that are not in the normal scope of work, because normal offering, because it's not a typical thing, but it's another service that I offer that they might want. So we put in the cost for what the upsell is, and then say to the customer, is this okay? And we continue with different potential upsells and cross-sells. Once the goal of this system here is for the customer to say that it's too much. And once the customer says it's too much, then I say, okay, what can we do about this? So for example, I can say to the customer, if you want me to come to your office 2 times a week to do this, I will, this is the price I'm giving you right now. If I can come 1 day a week and do a lot of this at home, the price will be less. If you want to see what that is, I'll show you what the price would be if we made that accommodation. So, so this continues until the customer has decided that it's okay with them, and the vendor has a list. At that time, we can tell the customer what the price would be. There is a system behind this. So anyway, that is the basic process of this. By the way, this is another way that every customer has a different price, because there are options in here to sell or not sell. There's choices that the customer could make. So different customers make different choices, and that's the way that there is a different price for each engagement. Hey, one of the things that we do with this is that I have a product called a diagnostic profit review. One of the things that happens with fixed pricing is that you tend to earn higher, that the cost tends to be higher. You make more money doing fixed pricing is another way to say it. And that money that you make it goes right down to the bottom line, because you've already included all of your costs and that sort of thing in the normal process of putting together your pricing strategy. So I have a free diagnostic profit review. You're welcome to give me a call. We can sit down. I would allow, 30, 45 minutes to go through this. And we can talk about how you feel about profits and what type of, how you do things now and how you feel about it. I would be happy to sit down and have a chat with you about that if you would like. And are there any questions?